The influence of Cubism was extensive. It not only promoted abstraction, but it also uh, encouraged the development of several movements that kind of springboards from it. The easiest to understand and one of the most straightforward is of the Futurists. I have up on the screen Futurism. I'm using a slightly earlier date, I think, than Gardner is, and a slightly different manifesto that was posted in 1909. The Futurists, in a variety of manifestos, talk about a new worldview. They are heavily influenced by Cubism, but it's Cubism in motion. So it's Cubism, and I guess you could say also, honestly, plus the influence of motion photography, but also the dynamism of the modern world. They extol, they exalt, they elevate dynamism and the speed of the machine age. They see an acceleration in noise and machinery and mechanics and the modern life that we enjoy or sometimes don't enjoy in cities. And their aim is, in fact, to embrace the modern world of the machine and to forget the past. Let me pause here because this movement is a movement that develops in Italy, and you do need to be asking yourself, why is this developing in Italy? An art movement, an Italian art movement that promotes modernism and a rejection of everything in the past. And I think you have to have a little bit of sympathy for these artists because they're living in the shadows of the ancients. I'm talking about the ancient Romans, of course, who reference the Greeks. And in addition to that, we have to deal with competing with the, monumental artists of the Renaissance and the High Renaissance, including Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, among others. And then, of course, we have the Baroque and we have Bernini, whose works adorn the city of Rome. This is a lot to compete against. What these artists are arguing is it's time to break with the past. The past is no longer relevant. It is retardataire. It is, and they use this word, anachronistic. It is simply old-fashioned. So they're embracing modernism, Cubism as a springboard, and splashes of motion photography as a reference that is more appropriate for the modern world. The image that I have on the screen right now is the poster child for the Futurist movement. It is the work by Bala. It's 2922 in our book, Dynamism of a Dog on a Leash, and it literally has become an icon for the entire movement of Futurism. It does pretty clearly suggest the influence of multiple exposure time photography. It does also at the same time exalt speed in a very machine-like way and gives us a sense of the blurring that occurs with movement and with motion. At the same time, it's kind of endearing and lovable because we have this cute little sausage dog, a kind of dachshund-like doggy that's moving along rather quickly, almost like he's on rollers, as if he's moving through time and space. The Futurist movement is unique in the way that it exalts machines and cities and industrialization. Very few artists and very few art movements have done this. It is not surprising then, as we'll see in a moment, that it is going to dissolve with the conflict of World War I. It does, in fact, begin by supporting the war as a cleansing action. Let me take us now to another one of the super famous images. This is Boccioni, 2923 in our book. It is unique forms of continuity in space. And it is the work on the left. Again, he is an Italian artist, a sculptor, and a painter. This is the human figure, but fragmented and dissected as if he's being torn as he moves through this modern world, following a very strong diagonal with kind of curving outlines, multiple contours that, suggest again the continued influence of Cubism and also at the same time the dynamism of the machine age. This again exalts motion, it exalts power, it exalts the idea of the machine, and it suggests that beauty can be found in speed and in the machine. The motion of the human figure itself is almost violent, and there's a tinge of that, I think, in many of the futurist images. I have next to it, of course, the Winged Victory, or the Victory of Samothrace, the Hellenistic, the late Greek creation that now is placed in the Louvre. I do believe that there is a resemblance that was intended, because in the futurist movement there was an attempt to erase, to obliterate, to get rid of the past. One manifesto that they produced said this, quote, "An automobile is more beautiful than the victory of Samothrace." Since it was referenced in the manifestos, I think that there is a specific reference that is also taking place with Boccioni's piece. When you go to the textbook in Gardner, you'll also be able to read some of the text from, I think it's the 1910 manifesto, talking about past sculpture as an anachronism, meaning it is old-fashioned, it is out of date. We should, according to the futurists, embrace modernism and allow sculpture to, quote, "dissolve the finite lines and the contained areas of the statues." Don't keep them restricted, but let them to flow in almost a sense of the new science and relativity. Boccioni is then one of the promoters of futurism, giving us simultaneous views at once and fractured forms, and cubism essentially in motion. Boccioni will also, like many futurist artists, be compelled to join the army in the First World War, because of course the futurists are talking about the wonder and beauty of the machine and of the machine of war. Okay. Like others, Boccioni will die, and it will be World War I that will be the death, literally, quite literally, of futurism. Before we talk about that, let me give us 2924. This is by another futurist artist, Severini, and it's his Armored Train in Action, 1915, and it's located in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. This clearly borrows, again with the fractured forms, from Cubism, but adds an exaltation of the machine and of modernity as a part of it. The machine here, the armored train, is pristine, it's brand new, it's powerful. You can even see the polished surfaces and the rivets. So everything about it has a kind of purity. There's a great massive cannon on the top, which suggests power. And it reflects the ideas that war, with its great machines, driven by these new powerful killing machines, can actually improve and cleanse society. Unfortunately, this is not going to be the case. If you take a look also, before I forget to say it, the soldiers are kind of anonymous figures with their mechanized bodies and their mechanized guns peeking out of the armored vehicle, which is protecting them. Futurism will die. It is going to break up, as many of the members feel compelled to join the army. Some of them are killed. That is going to include Boccioni. But the realities of war also become very harsh and sharp, and Boccioni, at least in his diaries, in his notes, in his letters, suggests that as he experiences war, he begins to see that it is not something beautiful and terrible at the same time. He's leaning instead towards seeing the horrors of war. And that's going to be true, I think, for anybody who actually serves on the battlefield. The ideas of futurism, however, are going to linger and contribute to Italian fascism, which is going to emerge after the war. I need to take us back to look at some sculpture and the developments of abstraction and sculpture. I would like to begin with Brancusi, who is generally considered to be a pioneer of abstraction and sculpture, creating the earliest examples of abstract sculpture through simplification of form. Yes, I know Rodin is a powerful sculptor and lives until the 20th century. He leans in the direction of abstraction, but I'm going to argue he doesn't actually take us there. Brancusi is Romanian. He comes to Paris in 1904, and yes, he works for Rodin. He is an assistant to Rodin. Rodin recognizes Brancusi's skill and wants to offer him a really premier position in his studio. Upon considering this, Brancusi says this to Rodin, quote, "Nothing grows in the shadow of a great tree." And with that, he said no and left Rodin's workshop. He went off on his own, and everything he did was almost in opposition to the way in which Rodin did it and the appearance in terms of sculpture that the two artists produced. For one thing, and that's why I want you to see these photos of Brancusi, he carved his own stuff. Yes, he had assistants, but he did his own creations. He worked on his own marble carvings, his own wood carvings, and he thought craftsmanship was an important part of everything that he produced. Rodin was satisfied with the idea for the creation, which originated in the mind of the artist and the fingers as he pressed into the clay. Brancusi also, let's take a look at some of his works, creates incredibly simplified forms, reducing his images to the essentials. He rejects all of the emotion that is in Rodin's work, and he also rejects the rough surfaces that, that Rodin incorporated as a hallmark of his presentation. Brancusi also works with a restricted number of themes throughout his career, working with one and then taking that and working it and reworking it until it satisfies him. Almost universally, the path that he follows is towards reduction of form and simplification of forms. As he does that, he creates abstract images. Okay, these are works that you can all find in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I just want you to see what I'm talking about with abstraction. The work that's on the left is Brancusi's torso. It is a partial figure, and he owes that to Rodin. On the other hand, he has completely reinterpreted the partial figure, stripped away emotionalism, stripped away rough and bumpy surfaces, and he gives a blaze of the bronze surface, which he considered, I'm going to say, respectful to the material. It is a very simplified segment of a human form. You can't tell if it's male, you can't tell if it's female. It also seems to share with other forms in nature. And this does, in fact, exist in a wooden version from a tree. And I think it also suggests the trunk and branches of a tree, the universal qualities in nature. So through simplification of form, Brancusi is capturing an essence of things. The one in the middle, if we were in the classroom, I'd ask you to guess what it is. It is a creature who can be found by the water, who has a very mobile kind of body, limber kind of body. It is a seal. And if you can imagine the kind of motion, the movement, the slow and gentle moves of the seal, and the great flexibility of the seal's body, I think Brancusi's captured it, although he hasn't given us much in terms of detail of the seal. The one that's on the far right is of a cock. That's a rooster. And if you take a look at the bronze portion, that is the sculpture. And it does suggest the comb of a rooster. It gives us the beak and maybe the top of the comb of the rooster as well. What I would also like you to be aware of is that Brancusi does design and carve his own bases. And in the case of the cock in particular, you can see for a stone under the bronze cock, and then under the stone you can see wood. The form of the base often complements the sculpture. In this case, it echoes the comb of the cock. Okay. I think we have arrived at the view that Brancusi has indeed succeeded in abstracting images. And when I teach Brancusi, sometimes in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I make that point, and you can look around and do go there because there is a whole room filled with Brancusi pieces. I make the point that he is a pioneer of abstraction. This, however, is what Brancusi has to say about people like me who call his work abstract. Quote, "They are imbeciles who call my work abstract. That which they call abstract is the most realistic. because that which is real is not the exterior form, but the idea, the essence of things. So for Brancusi, the thing I would like you to remember is that phrase, the essence of things, because that's what the maestro is after. We're going to be looking at bird and space in a moment, which is the one that's in our textbook. But before we get there, I'd like to have you see how Brancusi got there. He began very early in the 20th century carving images of what he called the magic bird. And this came out of Stravinsky's Firebird, which is a source. It's a ballet concerning a magical bird, and it's based upon Russian folk tales. This magic bird has great glistening golden feathers and will help to save a prince and princess from an evil sorcerer. How good can you get for a mythic source for a piece of art? This begins with the work on the left. The idea of the golden feathers is echoed in the bronze. We have a birdie with a round belly, and do look at the bronze portion of the work on the left. You can still see the legs, which is directly aligned to the neck and head of our birdie. Behind the legs are tapering forms that create the feathers, the tail of the birdie. And then we can go up through the neck and the face of the birdie, very simplified. This is also presented to us in a marble form in the middle, and then on the far right, an incredibly simplified version of exactly the same thing, where the birdie is tapered, kind of thrusting upward. I'd like you to look at the very tip of it. You get an abstraction of the open mouth of the birdie, and I'd like you to appreciate the fact that Brancusi in this has selected a kind of golden piece of marble. I believe it's marble. That bears reference to the story of the sorcerer and the magical bird and the prince and princess. Okay, this is how it turns out. The one that we have on the left, figure 2946 in our book, Bird in Space. And in this particular image, I don't think I can convince any of you that it's an actual depiction of a bird. And Brancusi would not have wanted you to think of it this way either. Instead, it is the essence of things. It is the nature of things. When you think of a bird, you think of a creature that can fly, that has great freedom and the ability for great movement. So he's given us a form that, in fact, seems to soar upward with a sweeping outline, conveying the sensation of flight, the release that comes with flight, the essence of flight. No, this is not a robin, a blue jay, or a hawk. It is not a specific bird. It is the nature of birds and the liberation that birds have through flight and the exhilaration that we could experience in flight. The photograph that is on our right, I would like you to see, because Brancusi took it himself. He was visited in his studio by a very prominent American photographer, Edward Steichen, and Steichen suggested, "Oh, I can take pictures of your works for you." And Brancusi said, "No, no, 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 I think I want to do my own." And I think that's important, because Brancusi took these photographs to send to people who were interested in buying his works, which means it's how he wanted his works to be seen. And in the case of Bird in Flight, I would like you to see the way he has placed reflected light on the surface of this, causing the entire image to be dematerialized, conveying the idea of the sensation of flight, the release of flight, and the freedom that comes with it. An incredibly important sculptor who helps to move sculpture toward the direction of abstraction in the 20th century.